Well, Scott Taylor, in the reading that Travis shared with us, reminds us that imagination is a really powerful thing. It allows us to see deeper into what is really there, and then to see beyond what is really there to what could be there. It opens up new worlds. When I read that line about giving the world a soul, I remembered being a child, the way I used to talk to trees, the way I carried an imaginary elf to school in my pocket, dreaming of adventures and daring rescues, traveling to imaginary worlds through the world of books. The world of my childhood was deeply soulful, and I've talked to enough people about it to feel confident that many children experience the world that way. Maybe you did too. And many of us find that as we grow older, we lose some of that innate ability to imbue the world with soul. I can't speak for us all, but my soul-affirming imagination has grown dimmer over the years. I'll come back to that. So what is imagination? According to the Oxford English Dictionary, it is the faculty or action of forming new ideas or images or concepts of external objects not present to the senses. The faculty or action of forming new ideas, images, or concepts of external objects not present to the senses. And the ability of the mind to be creative or resourceful. So imagination is what allows us to move beyond the factual and the concrete into the world of possibility. Now, as an idealistic young teenager, I was transfixed by the musical Man of La Mancha, written by Dale Wasserman and loosely based on the story of Miguel Cervantes, the 17th century Spanish author, and his famous fictional character Don Quixote. Now, Wasserman was not trying to be true to the novel in his stage play. So what I'm about to describe is the Quixote that Wasserman created in Man of La Mancha, not the original character, although there's certainly overlap. But Quixote is the archetypal dreamer. The most famous song from the musical is The Impossible Dream. He's a minor nobleman in the 17th century who becomes so enamored of tales of chivalry and adventure that he becomes delusional and fancies himself a knight-errant out to seek adventure, seeing the world as he believed it should be rather than as it was. Now, this leads him to believe that windmills are giants to be defeated in battle, that a shaving basin is the golden helmet of Mambrino, and that a tavern prostitute is the fine lady of his dreams. The results are sometimes devastating and sometimes hilarious. But along the way, he touches people, and he offers a glimpse of self-respect and hope to some people who believed themselves to be worthless. Now, this madness of his is an embarrassment to his family, and they try to break him of his idealism. In one exchange, the doctor who has been given the task of curing him from his delusions says to him, "There are no giants, no kings under enchantment, no chivalry, no knights. There have been no knights for 300 years. Quixote replies calmly, "So learned and yet so misinformed." Angry, the doctor replies, "These are facts." And Quixote replies, "Facts are the enemy of truth." Quixote gave his world a soul. In the midst of squalor, he saw beauty. His family despaired of his overactive imagination and called it madness. And yet his vision allowed other people to dream also. I might not go so far to say that facts are the enemy of truth, but if we look only at the facts, we often miss the deeper truths that shimmer all around us. So just what does imagination do for us? The writer Ursula Le Guin reminds us that, quote, as great scientists have said, and as all children know, it is above all by the imagination that we achieve perception and compassion and hope. It is above all by the imagination that we achieve perception, compassion, and hope. Let's take those one at a time. Imagination allows us to achieve perception. Now, I'm married to a scientist, so that one immediately made sense to me, having listened to him talk about his work. The great discoveries of science so often spring not only from facts and data, but from an intuitive leap of the creative mind. An imaginative ability to perceive something that is not immediately evident. It's no wonder that there are so many quotations about imagination that are attributed to Albert Einstein. My favorite, the true sign of intelligence is not knowledge, but imagination. The true sign of intelligence is not knowledge, but imagination. It reminds us that without that ability to imagine beyond what we know through our physical senses, we would never perceive so many things that are currently invisible to us. I think this is part of what Scott Taylor meant by giving the world a soul. Our imagination allows us to perceive the beauty and the magic that may lie hidden, but are in fact all around us. And then imagination allows us to achieve compassion. I think it's imagination that allows us to see the humanity in others that we might otherwise discount. We can look at another person, even a person we might consider an enemy, and imagine the life that shaped them, the longings of their heart, the pain they've suffered. As Frederick Buechner, the great 20th century preacher and theologian, put it in his book, Whistling in the Dark, if we are to love our neighbors, before doing anything else, we must see our neighbors with our imagination as well as our eyes. That is to say, like artists, we must see not just their faces, but the life behind and within their faces. Here it is love that is the frame we see them in. He's asking us to imagine the parts of people that we can't see, the struggles and the loves and the simple humanity that we can so easily overlook. A dear friend of mine has a little card taped to the wall of his office with the quotation, "Be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a great battle." Those words, which are often attributed to Plato, I did some searching and of course found about 8 different people that may have said them first. Most likely the 19th century Scottish clergyman John Watson, in case you care. These are the kind of rabbit holes I go down when I'm working on sermons. But that idea, be kind for everyone you meet is fighting a great battle, whoever said it, asks us to use our imagination with everyone we meet, to remember that there's so much more to their lives than what we see on the surface, and to approach them with compassion rather than judgment. So imagination can allow our perception and our compassion. And then we get to the third quality that Ursula Le Guin lifts up, and that's hope. And that for me is where they all come together to move us toward a better world and a better future. If we can perceive the beauty that is already around us, and if we can feel true compassion, then surely we will want to create a better world. We'll want to protect and preserve the beauty of that soulful natural world. We'll want those people whose lives we have imagined and who we have viewed with compassion to be able to flourish and to thrive. We'll want that for all people because our imagination has allowed us to see the true humanity of all people. And so we turn our imagination to the future, and we begin to imagine what that better world would look like. We create a vision of what might be possible. And it gives us the hope to work for that future. Without a vision, the people perish, right? But with a vision created by imagination, great things are possible. First we dream it, and then we do it. Now, this idea has been woven into our religious tradition from its earliest beginnings. I had a wonderful time tracking down a quotation that I just barely remembered. Phrases were still kind of resounding in my mind, which turned out to be from an essay by the great Unitarian minister Theodore Parker. He was writing on transcendentalism in 1877. And again, the internet is amazing. I remembered about 4 words accurately. I remembered the concepts, but I could plug in specific phrases and eventually pulled up a facsimile of the original pamphlet of his original speech in 1877. So he's speaking about transcendentalism, which was, of course, radical within Unitarianism when it first emerged. The early Unitarians tried to keep the transcendentalists out. Now we claim them with great pride. But speaking of transcendentalism, Parker said, "It looks to a future to be made, a church whose creed is truth, whose worship is love, a society full of industry and abundance, full of wisdom, virtue, and the poetry of life, a state with unity among all, with freedom for each, a church without tyranny, a society without ignorance, want, or crime, a state without oppression, yes, a world with no war among the nations to consume the work of their hands, and not restrictive policy to hinder the welfare of humanity. This is the human dream of the transcendentalist philosophy. Shall it ever become a fact? History says no. Human nature says yes." Talk about dreaming the impossible dream, right? I was saddened by how far we are from realizing that vision that Parker put into words in 1877. And yet grateful to be reminded that we're part of a tradition that has always believed that imagination can inspire us to work for a better world. But when I stumbled over a quotation from the great artist Pablo Picasso, who said, "Everything you can imagine is real," I began to feel uncomfortable. And then even a bit nervous. I was reminded of a passage from one of my favorite children's books, part of the Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis. Some of you may know them. In one of them, there's an island where dreams come true. And at first that seems like a wonderful thing until they realize it's not where daydreams come true. It's where your dreams come true. And they suddenly realize what a terrifying place it could be. They're on a ship. You hear people saying things like, "I can hear its jaws opening and closing over there. Oh no, do you hear those great scissors?" People were imagining the most terrible things that had ever been in their dreams. I said earlier that my soul-affirming imagination has grown less lively as I age, and that is sadly true. I forget to talk to the trees now. I rarely dream of magical adventures. But it's worse than that. It's not just that I've stopped using my imagination to give the world a soul. It's that I now allow my imagination to take off in directions that do just the opposite. The things I imagine can suck the soul right out of my world. This is why I love and relate to the story of Owl and his strange bumps. His imagination, which could have taken him to lovely places in his mind, instead turned his own feet into something so frightening that he couldn't sleep in his own bed. And I totally relate to that. I have never literally lain awake being afraid of my feet. Not quite, but I have often lain awake in the wee hours of the morning, being afraid of many other things. Worrying about things I've done in the past and can't change. Worrying about things I need to do in the future and might get wrong. Worrying about things that have never happened but might. then imagining in great detail all the different ways they could go wrong, worrying about things over which I have no control, imagining worst-case scenarios that will probably never come to pass. I'm sure none of you have ever done this, but I'm just here to tell you that some people do. Anxiety is the shadow side of imagination, because we are not only capable of imagining good and beautiful and inspiring things, we are also capable of imagining betrayal and disaster and failure, especially at 2 a.m. The ancient Roman philosopher Seneca said, "We suffer in our imagination more often than in reality." And while a certain degree of imagination about the things that could go wrong can help us to be better prepared and equipped to cope with possible challenges, getting trapped in that mindset can be absolutely paralyzing. And we face the same challenge in the way we apply our imagination to our interactions with other people. It's easy for me to talk this morning about imagining the lives of the people we meet, seeing their full humanity, recognizing the hidden battles they fight, and meeting them with compassion. But in reality, so often my imagination helps me jump to conclusions and assumptions about other people that are less than compassionate. I make snap judgments based on people's appearance, or their bumper stickers, or the kind of car they drive. My imagination can fill in all kinds of unflattering details about them and their life, which often, if I have the chance to learn more about them, turn out to be completely wrong. I remember vividly the time I sat in a laundromat in Somerville, Massachusetts. I was a divinity school student waiting for my clothes to dry and reading a book about the AIDS crisis for one of my classes. It was a very eye-catching book with a bright red cover with AIDS in big white capital letters. And a kind of tough-looking guy in cowboy boots and a Western-style shirt kept looking over at me like he wanted to say something. And I was pretty sure I didn't want to hear it. I took one look at the muscles and the boots, and my imagination told me he was a hypermasculine bigot. And eventually he did speak up in a soft and tentative voice and thanked me for caring enough to be informed. He was gay, and he volunteered for an AIDS hotline, and he had lost a lot of friends. And we ended up talking for a long time, long after my clothes were dry. Imagination is not always benign. We are capable of imagining terrible things. So if Picasso is right and everything we can imagine is real, then we need to be really careful about what we imagine. If imagination is what allows us to move beyond the realm of the factual and concrete into the world of possibilities, it's a very powerful tool. And like any powerful tool, it can be really dangerous if it's used carelessly. One saving grace, though, is that if our imagination takes us in the wrong direction, we can use our imagination to turn it around and find a new path. We just have to be aware of what we're doing. The African-American activist and philosopher Angela Davis once said, "Walls turned sideways become bridges." So if you find your imagination taking you down paths you don't want to travel, showing you a world you don't want to make real, leading you into a wall, then use your imagination to turn that wall sideways, turn it into a bridge, cross over it into a different vision, a better vision. We have that power if we're aware. One of my favorite authors as a child was Lloyd Alexander. My mother was an elementary librarian, and she would bring me books from book fairs, often signed by the author, and I got enraptured by the Chronicles of Prydain by Lloyd Alexander, and I wanted to know how to pronounce some of the words in it. And I wrote to him, and he actually wrote back. So I have a special soft spot in my heart for Lloyd Alexander. But In his efforts to encourage young people to read, he wrote, "Imagination is at the heart of everything we do. Scientific discoveries couldn't have happened without imagination. Art, music, and literature couldn't exist without imagination. And so anything that strengthens imagination, and reading certainly does that, can help us for the rest of our lives." I think he's right. And in these turbulent times, I think we need to strengthen our imagination. We need to use it to find those qualities that Ursula Le Guin talks about, those qualities of compassion and perception and hope. But we need to do it with a full awareness of imagination's power and make sure that we're using our imagination to give the world a soul and not to take away the soul of the world. The choice is ours.